Well, one of the challenges that people face when they're trying to build their wealth is that they get inundated with outside influences about how they're supposed to do it, and they sometimes get quick get rich schemes, and they go off looking for immediate gratification instead of having a long-term vision of being of service to people to build wealth. So the biggest challenge that people face is that they are not being clear about what their service is, which is a source of income, and they're wanting immediate gratification without being dedicated to a service. So that's one. The second is that they're not really having the values that will lead them there. You have to value wealth in order to have wealth. Money automatically circulates through the economy to whoever values it most. And if you don't really value it, and you just live in a fantasy that you do, and you really value spending it, then you're going to be frustrated building wealth, because the second you get money, you're going to spend it. And so often do people do this. And the third thing is they don't really have a strategy. They come up with kind of a fantasies and quick get rich schemes instead of a real solid strategy that matches their value systems that they're really willing truly to do. So those three things can make a difference in the financial destiny. So many people are living in this delusion that they're going to get wealthy without following those three things. So it's important to make sure that you have a strategy, make sure you really value it, and make sure that you have patience. I knew a gentleman that many years ago, I'd rather not say his name, but he was somebody about 25 years ago, that as I was methodically following my strategies of building wealth, he was off trying to get rich overnight. And every time he'd have really close, he'd get there, something would come up and he'd be back to zero again. And he would risk all his capital, and he'd go after this big risk to get this real big thing. And today he is not even off the ground. He's still looking for those quick get rich schemes. And I just methodically, like the tortoise, kept building my wealth, and I'm living the dream life that he once fantasized about. And so often people are wanting this fantasy, and this gentleman lived in this fantasy and wanted it quick, and was not willing to do the due diligence and the service and follow the strategies that got him there. So that's a classical example. I know a gentleman also in Colorado that had this fantasy that he was going to get rich overnight, doing this quick thing and build this company and exit this company and just turn it and flip it and make money. And he got into it, and it almost killed him with a heart attack and almost ulcers, trying to do something that really wasn't his heart. You have to do something you love to do, and you have to be willing to do the things that really make it achieve. Otherwise, you're living in a fantasy. And so many people do that when it comes to their wealth. And most people, without even realizing it, are actually living in the delusion that they're going to get wealthy and live this incredible life spending money without actually learning the art of saving and investing it to make sure that they have the money to do that. So often do people do this. And I know a woman that was basically living in a fantasy that she was going to get this wealthy outcome in her life without working, and just have it by kind of like this lotto mentality. And that's not the way to do it. My experience is if you have a caring attitude about serving humanity and you're willing to build a business that serves people, you have the higher probability of achieving wealth than if you look for a quick get rich scheme. Well, it's similar to what the earliest question was. My observation, if I ask thousands of people in the audience, and when I'm speaking, how many of you want to be financially independent? Everybody puts their hand up. And I ask how many are financially independent? Most everybody puts their hand down. And it's interesting because most people, if you gave them $10 million or $20 million or $50 million, they immediately spend their money on depreciables that are immediate gratifying, that actually go down in value, that are consumables, instead of actually taking their money and investing it and making it double. So the average person who lives in a fantasy world about being wealthy are actually having a value on consumable buying and consumerism instead of actually investing. And it's only 1% that actually dedicate their lives to investing. And it's quite interesting that they have this fantasy that they're going to get there without having the skill set and the value system and the strategies to get there. Well, whenever you're not living according to your highest values and you're not living authentically, you don't feel great about yourself. When you do, because of this unfulfillment, you look for immediate gratification and stimulus. Stimulus in clothes, thinking that's going to make me feel better. Stimulus in drugs, and that's going to make me feel better. Stimulus in sex. All the dopamine stimulators emerge in somebody when they're unfulfilled in their life. And so what happens is they end up spending their money on all these things to try to make them feel better about themselves, instead of actually being inspired by their life, fulfilled doing what's meaningful to them, and building wealth methodically. Those individuals, they have wealth at the end of their life instead of life at the end of their wealth.